My name is Taylor Sinclair. I am 38 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my cousin Kayla slapped me across the face in front of 25 relatives, hard enough to leave a red handprint. And my Aunt Amanda looked straight at me and said, "Say sorry or get out now." My Uncle Robert did not defend me. He did not even speak. He walked to the front door, opened it, and stood there holding it open like I was some stranger who had stayed too long. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I did not cry as I drove away from the Cape Cod estate. I did not ask why, and I did not scream into the empty car. The wind from the Massachusetts winter storm was howling against the windshield, throwing thick sheets of snow across the dark highway. But inside me, everything was perfectly still. My cheek still burned from the brutal slap my cousin Kayla had delivered in front of 25 relatives, but the heat had quickly turned into ice. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. It was entirely reason-driven. I pulled my car over at a deserted rest stop beneath the sickly orange glow of a flickering light. The engine idled and the dashboard clock ticked past midnight. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon even a microscopic shred of regret or hesitation, but there was only absolute clarity. This wasn't an emotional breakdown, this was a balance sheet. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, funding an illusion of love while footing every single bill. Now, I realized it had been nothing more than a toxic subscription service, and my compassion was a financial resource they had overdrafted for the very last time. I opened my corporate logistics laptop. The screen glowed in the dark car, casting a sharp blue light across my face. My hands were completely steady as I logged into my primary banking portals. There was no panic in my chest, only the smooth, detached efficiency I used every day as a senior maritime logistics director managing high-stakes freight networks. If my Uncle Robert could hold the front door open for me like I was garbage, then he and Aunt Amanda could certainly hold their own financial weight. With a few precise clicks, I navigated to the automated transfer schedules. First, I selected the automatic monthly transfers I used to fund the $250,000 second mortgage on their precious coastal house. I did not hesitate. I hit cancel. Next, I pulled up the operational funding pipeline I had set up to keep Kayla's luxury spa afloat, halting the ongoing cash flows. Finally, I went through the recurring transfers for their premium medical insurance and casual lifestyle subsidies. One by one, I deleted every single mandate. 6 years of absolute devotion ended in less than 5 minutes. I sat back against the cold leather seat, watching the confirmation boxes pop up on the screen. Inside the vehicle, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise. The kind made of cold facts, undeniable numbers, and quiet, systematic retribution. They weren't shocked by what they had done to me in that living room. They were only going to be shocked that I had stopped playing along. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. I shut the laptop, threw the car into drive, and merged back onto the empty, snow-covered highway toward Boston. Back in my quiet Boston apartment, the absolute silence felt heavy. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the bank statements pulled up on my screen, a cold, digital record of a slow, bleeding tragedy. $650,000. That was the exact price of my blind loyalty over the last 6 years. I had poured my life savings, my corporate bonuses, and my internal peace into a family that viewed my existence as nothing more than an uncredited, automated teller machine with an infinite limit. When Kayla wanted to open her luxury spa network, I didn't question it. I simply handed over a $90,000 cash injection to secure her prime retail lease. When Aunt Amanda wept about losing the Cape Cod house, I stepped into the line of fire and agreed to fully pay their $250,000 second mortgage. I paid for their premium quartz countertops. I paid for the elegant new wooden baseboards. I funded their lavish holiday dinners and covered their soaring medical insurance premiums. Yet, my name was completely erased from the family narrative, replaced by a fictional story about family savings that never existed. To them, I was never a daughter or even a niece. I was an unwanted tenant who owed an eternal debt for the crime of being taken in. After my biological parents passed away when I was a child, Amanda and Robert became my surrogate guardians. But they never gave me a home. They gave me a ledger. My achievements were treated as currency, and my presence was treated as a heavy, constant burden. If I succeeded, it was ignored. If I struggled, I was a dramatic inconvenience. Kayla was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the invisible ghost who kept the lights on. Most people look at a dynamic like this and ask a simple question: why did you stay? Why did an educated, highly successful, independent woman allow herself to be hollowed out like a doormat for 6 years? The truth is, I was trapped in a psychological prison without steel bars, bound by the heavy chains of learned helplessness. From the time I was a little girl, they conditioned me to believe that my worth was entirely transactional. I was only valuable when I was useful. This invisible chain became entirely unbreakable when my great-grandmother Evelyn passed away. She was the only soul who truly loved me, the one who taught me how to balance a checkbook and shake hands with dignity. But on her deathbed, she squeezed my hand and whispered a final, crushing request to keep this family together, Taylor. She knew they were weak, but she didn't realize they were predators. I carried that promise, like a sacred vow, twisting my own kindness into a weapon against myself. I thought writing those massive checks was an act of love, an offering to buy safety at a table where I was never truly welcome. But walking into that freezing winter night made me realize an ugly truth. Evelyn raised me to be resilient, not a martyr. She never wanted me to light myself on fire just to keep cold parasites warm. The silence didn't last. By morning, the family group chats erupted, but there wasn't a single apology waiting on my screen. Instead, the network turned into a coordinated machinery of defensive gaslighting. My cousin Kayla led the charge, sending a wall of aggressive text messages, framing me as a sensitive drama queen. According to her, I had deliberately ruined a sacred family milestone over an accidental brush of shoulders at the fireplace. She told me my behavior was unhinged, that I was deeply ungrateful, and that my cold departure had embarrassed her in front of her guests. Aunt Amanda followed up minutes later. Her messages carried that familiar, toxic chill of parental authority. She ordered me to stop throwing a childish tantrum and to restore the automated bank transfers immediately. She claimed that the family's social standing in Cape Cod was being threatened by my pettiness and that my financial strike was making her sick. When I didn't respond, she took the warfare public. She posted a long status update on Facebook, filled with false pity, stating that some people let corporate success turn them completely against the blood relations who had sheltered them when they were helpless orphans. Most people would feel a burning need to defend themselves against public lies. They would call back, scream into the receiver, or write desperate explanations. But inside me, the emotional noise had flatlined. I didn't answer a single text. I didn't type a single comment. I simply flipped my phone face down on the counter and let the screen go dark. Their desperate scramble for control only confirmed what I already knew. They weren't mourning the loss of a family bond. They were mourning the loss of their primary cash flow. I opened my corporate directory and called attorney Zachary. He was a high-stakes real estate and asset recovery specialist known for absolute unyielding precision. We met in his glass-walled office overlooking the freezing waters of Boston Harbor. The space smelled of expensive leather, heavy bond paper, and clinical finality. I handed him a thick manila folder containing 6 years of meticulously archived bank statements, wire receipts, and signed loan agreements for Kayla's premium spa storefront. Zachary reviewed the ledgers, his expression shifting from detached interest to sharp professional calculation. He looked up at me over his glasses. "This is a massive paper trail, Taylor. They've systematically overdrawn your capital without a single binding repayment structure." I leaned forward, my voice calm, factual, and lethal. "I don't want an emotional reconciliation, Zachary. I want a formal notice drafted today." By late afternoon, the document was finalized. It was a cold, institutional declaration of war. We gave Amanda, Robert, and Kayla exactly 14 business days to initiate a formal, legally binding repayment schedule for the documented loans or face aggressive asset liquidation. I signed the authorization without a trace of hesitation. Inside my soul, the subversion of power was complete. I was no longer a wounded relative begging to be seen. I was an executive enforcing a structural debt. The legal machinery didn't just move, it sliced. Less than a week after the initial notices were served, Attorney Zachary called me back into his office. The calm, maritime view of Boston Harbor outside his floor-to-ceiling windows remained unchanged, but the atmosphere inside the room had shifted completely. Zachary didn't offer a polite greeting. He simply slid a single certified document from the county recorder's office across the heavy mahogany desk. His expression was flat, clinical, and lethal. We went to perform a routine title search to execute the asset collection on the Cape Cod property, he said, tapping the paper with his fountain pen. But we hit a wall. Or rather, we found a crime. I picked up the document, my eyes tracking the official county stamps before landing on the absolute bottom of the page. There, sitting beneath the names of Amanda and Robert, was a bold, cursive script. It was my name, Taylor Sinclair. It was a signature written with smooth, practiced strokes, but it wasn't mine. Someone had meticulously forged my name on a fraudulent deed transfer earlier that year. With a single stroke of a stolen pen, they had criminally stripped me of my lawful co-ownership and added Kayla as the sole beneficiary of the property. But the betrayal didn't stop at simple real estate fraud. Zachary flipped the page, exposing the financial underbelly of their scheme. The moment Kayla's name was added to the title, she had used the equity I spent 6 years building to open a reckless, fraudulent home equity line of credit. $180,000. That was the exact amount she had immediately withdrawn to artificially inflate her failing spa network and drown her personal debts. My stomach twisted, not with sadness, but with a deep, boiling disgust. They hadn't just binned my checks, they had stolen my identity. Crucially, the land they had compromised wasn't just a random plot of coastal soil. The legal description on the deed specifically outlined the boundaries of the historic waterfront shipyard, the exact property left behind by my deceased biological father. It was the only tangible piece of his history I had left, the place where I used to sit on the old wooden docks as a child, dreaming of maritime logistics. By forging my signature, they hadn't just committed real estate fraud, they had desecrated my father's legacy to salvage the luxury delusions of their biological daughter. This was the ultimate realization of the trap of cruel normalization. When a parasitic family indulges a golden child for decades, their psychological boundaries warp entirely. Amanda and Robert didn't see this as a felony. They had normalized the exploitation to the point of absolute delusion. In their twisted family hierarchy, my role as an orphan outcast was to give, and Kayla's role as the biological favorite was to take. They genuinely believed that Kayla was entitled to steal my equity, that her unearned luxury spa was worth more than my sacred inheritance. To them, my father's legacy was just uncredited fuel to be burned for their comfort. But they forgot one thing. A balance sheet doesn't have feelings, and the law doesn't care about favoritism. They had crossed from a domestic disagreement straight into a criminal felony. There was no going back. Winter in Boston didn't just arrive, it locked the city in a brutal grip of frost and grey ice, but the real storm hit the Cape Cod estate first. The moment the district attorney opened the formal felony investigation and Capital Trust froze the fraudulent $180,000 home equity line of credit, Kayla's premium spa network shattered into immediate bankruptcy. Without my capital to artificially manipulate her payroll, her rent, or her suppliers, the unearned luxury facade she had paraded for years simply evaporated overnight. Then came the swift execution of judgment. Because the fraudulent line of credit was pulled against a forged title, the lender instantly accelerated the underlying debts, putting the entire family property into immediate foreclosure proceedings. They were about to lose the house. I had spent 6 years systematically saving from their incompetence. On a freezing Tuesday evening, a sharp knock rattled my front door. I looked through the peephole to find my Aunt Amanda and Uncle Robert standing under the dim hallway bulb. They looked diminished, aged by a decade in less than a month. Their shoulders slumped as the biting draft leaked through the corridor. I opened the door but remained standing behind the threshold, an absolute barrier of cold clarity. Amanda didn't blast me with insults this time. Her eyes were swollen and bloodshot, her manicured hands trembling violently as she clutched a useless, rain-soaked designer purse. She started weeping openly, the tears smudging her makeup into dark streaks down her face. "Taylor, please," she sobbed, her voice cracking in a desperate pitch I had never heard before. "You have to drop the charges. They're going to arrest my daughter. Kayla is facing actual prison time, and the bank is taking our home. You can't do this to your own family." Robert stood right behind her, staring at the floor, completely hollowed out. The same man who had confidently held the front door open on Thanksgiving night to banish me into the freezing air was now shivering in my hallway, unable to even meet my gaze. The power flip was complete. The high-handed abusers had been reduced to desperate beggars on the doorstep of the outcast they had thrown away. I rubbed my hands together, feeling nothing but a clinical detachment. This wasn't a moment for anger. It was the final reconciliation of an overdrafted account. I didn't yell. I didn't look at them with hatred. I simply reached over to my counter, picked up a printed copy of the bank's foreclosure acceleration notice, along with my formal refusal to sign a financial bailout, and dropped it into Amanda's shaking hands. "You held the door wide open when you threw me into the cold," I said, my voice quiet, factual, and lethal. "I'm just letting the winter finish what you started. Goodbye, Amanda." I stepped back and pulled the heavy wooden door shut. The sound of the solid brass deadbolt clicking into place rang through the empty apartment with absolute finality. Through the thick wood, the muffled sounds of Amanda's desperate weeping gradually faded away, leaving only a perfect, long-awaited peace. The wheels of legal justice ground forward with absolute finality. The county courts forcefully restored the deed of the Cape Cod property back to my name. Kayla accepted a severe plea deal involving years in federal prison and mandatory restitution, her luxury spa network permanently erased. Her husband, Brandon, filed for divorce immediately to distance himself from the criminal fallout. Aunt Amanda and Robert were forced to completely liquidate their personal assets just to survive the financial collapse. The large, unearned life they had built using my money suddenly became microscopic. Once the title was corrected, I severed the final thread. I secured the sole deed to my father's waterfront shipyard, locking his legacy safely under my control forever, and walked away from the rest of their ruined estate. Not because it lacked value, but because I refused to hold any further tethers to their world. I didn't want a single anchor tying me to their toxic ecosystem. I wanted my absolute sovereignty. Shortly after, a small package arrived at my Boston apartment. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was my biological great-grandmother Evelyn's emerald ring. Robert had forcefully taken it back from Kayla's hand. As I held it under my lamp, the deep green stone caught the light beautifully, and the tiny scratch on the gold setting was still there. Evelyn once told me that flaws are simply part of a story. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. For the first time in years, everything inside my apartment actually belonged to me. Looking back, I've come to realize that keeping a family together should never require you to systematically dismantle your own soul. For 6 years, I bent my boundaries, writing massive checks and staying silent through cruel insults just to keep ungrateful people warm. But my great-grandmother never raised me to be a doormat. She raised me to be unshakable. And even the strongest givers have absolute limits. Loving someone does not mean allowing them to exploit or destroy you forever. If you find yourself in a similar situation, trapped in the cold margins of your own family, remember that your compassion is a premium luxury, not an infinite line of credit for others to overdraft. It takes a profound kind of courage to understand that walking away from toxic bloodlines isn't an act of selfishness. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes it's the only way to set yourself free from a contract you never signed. You do not owe people your loyalty just because you share their DNA. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fighting harder. Sometimes true strength is quietly walking away, closing the heavy door behind you, and finally building a beautiful life that is completely unconditionally your own. If this journey resonated with your own hidden wounds, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more deep, real-life accounts. Leave a comment below. What would you have done the moment you realized your own family stole your father's legacy?